Palau, South Pacific. Dr. Pat Scannon, a medical researcher from California, dives beneath the crystalline waters on what should be a relaxing scuba vacation. At 60 feet below the surface, something catches his eye, a coral-encrusted metal wing jutting from the seafloor. He swims closer and sees markings barely visible beneath decades of marine growth. An identification plate stamped General Electric. It's an American aircraft, a World War II bomber. And as Scannon explores further, he realizes there are more. Multiple wrecks scattered across the harbor, American planes that went down during the brutal Pacific campaign and were never found, never recovered, never officially accounted for. When Scannon surfaces and begins asking questions, he discovers something disturbing. There are no records, no documentation. The fierce 18-month battle for Palau, a campaign that dyed the white sand red with blood, has been virtually erased from historical memory, overshadowed by Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The planes exist, the wreckage is there. But according to military records, these aircraft and the men who flew them simply don't exist. That discovery launched a 25-year obsession. Scannon would dedicate his life to finding the missing pilots of World War II, making over 70 trips to the Pacific, spending millions of his own money, and eventually helping identify dozens of lost airmen who had vanished without a trace over Japan and the Pacific Islands. Today, we're exploring the haunting mystery of America's missing Pacific pilots, the 47,000 servicemen who disappeared over Asian battle zones, and the ongoing mission to bring them home. To understand why these pilots were forgotten, you need to understand the Battle of Palau, one of World War II's bloodiest campaigns that history somehow forgot. Palau is a cluster of small islands in the western Pacific, about 500 miles east of the Philippines. In 1944, the Japanese controlled these islands and had fortified them heavily, with underground bunkers, artillery positions, and hidden defensive networks. The fight for Palau was spread across 18 months of combat from September 1944 through early 1945. The island of Palau alone cost over 10,000 American casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. The fighting was so intense, so brutal, that Marines who survived both Palau and Iwo Jima said Palau was worse. Yet today, most Americans have never heard of Palau or Palau. The battle has been overshadowed by nearly every other aspect of the Pacific War. There are no major movies about it, few books, it's a footnote. And because the battle was forgotten, so were the men who disappeared there. During the Palau campaign, dozens of American aircraft were shot down over the islands and surrounding waters. Torpedo bombers, dive bombers, fighter escorts. They were hit by anti-aircraft fire, shot down by Japanese fighters, or suffered mechanical failure and crashed into the jungle or ocean. Most crews were killed on impact or died shortly after crashing, but some may have survived, some may have been captured, some may have made it to shore and died from injuries or starvation waiting for rescue that never came. After the war, the American Graves Registration Service conducted searches throughout the Pacific, but Palau was difficult terrain, dense jungle, underwater coral labyrinths, deep ocean trenches. Many crash sites were never located. Many men were never found. Their families received letters missing in action, presumed dead. For decades, that's where the story ended. The men were gone. The war was over. Life moved on until Pat Scannon went diving in 1993. Pat Scannon wasn't just any scuba diver. He was a successful medical researcher who had developed treatments for cardiovascular disease. He had resources, intelligence, and a unique personal motivation for his quest. Scannon's mother had worked for the Nazis as a teenager in Czechoslovakia during the war, but she secretly assisted the Czech resistance. After the war, she married an American GI and moved to the United States. They divorced, and she remarried Harry Walterhouse, a veteran who ran their household with militaristic discipline, inspections, harsh penalties, consequences for any failure. Scannon's stepfather had been shaped by war, and that shaped Scannon's childhood. Finding missing soldiers became something Scannon saw as a way to become comfortable with his painful past, a way to honor what his stepfather and men like him had endured. When Scannon discovered those aircraft wrecks in Palau, he couldn't let it go. Were their remains still inside? Could families be notified? Could these men finally be brought home? Upon returning to California, he began researching the lost planes. No records of them existed. The Air Force Historical Research Agency had minimal documentation. The National Archives had gaps. Surviving veterans from the units that fought at Palau were elderly and their memories fading. Scannon began making annual trips to Palau with increasingly sophisticated equipment, magnetometers to detect metal, side scan, sonar to map the seafloor, underwater cameras, and eventually submersible ROVs. The problem was that all of the accounts of what happened to the aircraft were different. Family members had heard one story. Official records said something else. Palauan tribal elders who witnessed crashes had their own accounts. Nothing added up. One case consumed Scannon for years, the disappearance of Lieutenant J. Ross Manown Jr. and his two-man crew. Just before dawn on September 10, 1944, the flight deck of the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise came to life. The day's mission was critical, to hit Japanese positions and ships in advance of an amphibious invasion of Palau Island. Manown's plane was a TBM Avenger torpedo bomber, nicknamed the Pregnant Beast because it was so heavy that crews grimly joked it could fall faster than it flew. Its crew consisted of Manown, pilot, Anthony DePetta, turret gunner, and Wilbur Mitz, radio man and navigator. Manown was 26 years old, a decorated pilot from West Virginia who had flown combat missions throughout the Pacific for over 2 years. His mission: attack Japanese positions on the island of Malakal in Malakal Harbor, Palau. Manown and 3 other Avengers began to descend, intending to hit enemy ships. Suddenly, anti-aircraft fire erupted from multiple emplacements in the hills around the harbor. Moments later, a fiery blast tore through the underside of Manown's plane. A wing and rudder snapped off, sending the plane into what a pilot aboard a nearby aircraft later described as a violent spin. The Avenger plunged into Malakal Harbor and disappeared beneath the surface. No one saw parachutes. No survivors were spotted. The 3 men were declared missing in action, presumed dead. Families received telegrams. Wilbur Mitz's family was informed of his disappearance. Anthony DePetta's family mourned their son. Manown's family grieved. For 70 years, the 3 men remained where they fell, trapped in their aircraft at the bottom of Malakal Harbor. Then, in 2013, Project Recover, the organization Scannon helped establish, located the wreckage. Scannon's decades-long quest had evolved beyond one man's obsession into something larger. Project Recover, a collaborative team of marine scientists, archaeologists, historians, and volunteers using cutting-edge technology to locate missing World War II service members. Project Recover combines historical research with advanced underwater search technology, high-resolution sonar mapping, underwater autonomous vehicles, ROVs with HD cameras, GPS precision positioning, computer modeling of crash sites, forensic archaeological techniques. When they found Manown's Avenger in 2013, they carefully documented the site and notified the Defense POWMI Accounting Agency, DPAA, the U.S. government organization responsible for recovering and identifying remains of missing service members. In 2023, DPAA launched a recovery mission at the crash site. Divers carefully excavated the wreckage at 60 feet below the surface, bringing up bones, teeth, and personal artifacts. Remarkably, DNA testing of bones and teeth gathered conclusively identified 2 of the plane's crew members, Anthony DePetta and Wilbur Mitz, whose families were notified of their discovery in early 2023. 79 years after they died, DePetta and Mitz were finally identified. Their families, descendants who had never known their great-grandfather or great-uncle, finally had answers and closure. But there was still no trace of Manown. Some areas of the underwater debris field remained untouched, so in summer 2023, Project Recover returned to the site for a 3-week operation, hoping to find the pilot and bring him home. The search continues. Manown's story is just one of thousands. According to the DPAA, of the 72,335 U.S. service personnel still missing from World War II, almost 47,000 disappeared in Asian battle zones over Japan, China, Burma, Thailand, the Philippines, and Pacific Islands. 47,000 TAOs. That's not a typo. 47,000 American servicemen are still unaccounted for from the Pacific War alone. Why so many? Several reasons. The vastness of the Pacific theater. The area stretched from Hawaii to India, encompassing millions of square miles of ocean, jungle, and mountains. Aircraft could go down anywhere, and in the 1940s there was no satellite tracking, no GPS, no precise crash site data, brutal combat conditions. Many planes were shot down over enemy-held territory where recovery was impossible. Some crashed in dense jungle or mountainous terrain, others went into the ocean and sank to depths of thousands of feet. Inadequate post-war searches, the American Graves Registration Service did what it could with 1940s technology, but much of the Pacific was inaccessible, dangerous, or politically closed off during the Cold War. Records lost or never created. In the chaos of wartime, documentation was often incomplete. Some crash sites were witnessed but never precisely recorded. Some aircraft simply disappeared with no witnesses. Natural decay. In the tropical Pacific, human remains decompose rapidly. Jungle growth covers wreckage within years. Ocean currents scatter debris. Time literally erases evidence. For decades, families were told nothing could be done. The technology didn't exist, the locations were unknown, the cost would be prohibitive. But that's changing. What was impossible in 1945 is becoming possible today. Modern technology is revolutionizing the search for missing World War II service members. Side-scan sonar can map underwater terrain with such precision that a bomber lying on the ocean floor 200 feet down appears as clearly as if you were looking at it from above. DNA analysis can identify remains from a single tooth or bone fragment. Even after 80 years of decomposition in tropical conditions, enough genetic material often survives for positive identification. Satellite imagery and LiDAR can penetrate jungle canopy and reveal crash sites that have been hidden for decades. Computer modeling can analyze historical flight data, weather conditions, and eyewitness accounts to narrow search areas from hundreds of square miles to a few likely locations. Underwater ROVs can explore depths and conditions too dangerous for human divers, documenting wreck sites without disturbing remains. In 2022, a Thai archivist named Sakpanit was searching through flood-damaged police records when he found a 1945 report about a P-38 Lightning fighter that crashed in Mae Kua village in northern Thailand. The pilot's body had been buried by villagers. The report gave a precise location. An interview with a 100-year-old woman who had heard the crash provided corroboration. DPAA investigators excavated the site and recovered remains. DNA testing identified the pilot, a reconnaissance flyer whose plane had disappeared the same day over Myanmar and northern Thailand. His record simply said, "Not known for location and cause of crash." After 77 years, he was identified and brought home to his family. Stories like this are becoming more common. In recent years, DPAA has averaged about 200 identifications per year of World War II missing service members, more than at any time since the immediate post-war period. Project Recover alone has located over 100 aircraft and helped account for dozens of missing service members. The most moving part of this story isn't the technology or the searches, it's the families. When Wilbur Mitz's family was notified in 2023 that his remains had been identified after 79 years, they wept. Generations who had never known him, great-grandchildren who had only seen photographs, suddenly had a connection to their ancestor. Some families have spent decades searching on their own. They've traveled to crash sites, they've interviewed elderly veterans, they've submitted DNA samples to DPAA in case remains are ever found. When Pat Scannon began contacting families of missing airmen from Palau, he discovered the disappearances haunted families for generations. Children grew up without fathers. Siblings never got to say goodbye. Parents died never knowing what happened to their sons. But here's what Scannon learned. Families don't want pity. They want answers. They want closure. They want their loved ones brought home and buried with honor. And increasingly, that's happening. In 2024, DPAA and Project Recover continue working throughout the Pacific. They're searching waters off Palau, Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, Japan, and dozens of other locations. Every year, more families get that long-awaited knock on the door, the notification that after 70, 75, 80 years, their missing service member has been found, has been identified, is coming home. Pat Scannon passed away in 2017, but his legacy lives on. The organization he helped create, Project Recover, continues the mission. The families he connected continue supporting each other. The airmen he helped bring home are finally at rest. Of the 47,000 missing service members from the Pacific War, most will never be found. The ocean is too vast, the jungle too impenetrable. Time has erased too much evidence. But modern technology means that thousands can be found, thousands can be identified, thousands can be brought home. Every discovery matters, every identification matters, every family that finally gets closure matters. The battle for Palau may be forgotten by history books, but it's not forgotten by the families whose loved ones died there. They remember, they wait, they hope, and increasingly, they get answers. 47,000 now is missing, over 200 identified per year. At this rate, it will take over 2 centuries to find everyone, if we find everyone. But every single recovery honors not just the individual service member, but the promise America makes: we will never leave you behind. Lieutenant J. Ross Manown Jr. is still out there somewhere in Malakal Harbor. Anthony DePetta and Wilbur Mitz have come home. Thousands more wait. The search continues. The mission endures.